Steve McMahon is a Democratic strategist, and Michael Shearer is White House correspondent for Time magazine. Hello, all. Welcome back.
Hey, Chris.
Let's talk first about Iowa. We're 7 days out. Everyone is spinning it, you know, Rick Santorum. If Rick Santorum gets any votes, he's taking a victory out of it. The Romney, I talked to some Romney folks in the last couple of days. They say, well, if we finish in the top 3, that's good enough for us. Who needs this win the most, Mike?
The second-tier crowd needs the win the most. I mean, Romney can survive a little bit of a disappointment here. Ron Paul could probably come in pretty much anywhere and he'll still get votes going through. But you have Michelle Bachmann, Rick Santorum, and Rick Perry, who, if they don't perform very well, meaning in the top 3, it's really hard to see how they have an argument going into New Hampshire. And what they're trying to do is get to South Carolina and hoping that South Carolina finally gives them that boost.
And Michelle, Iowa, the Iowa defenders, and they are legion, say this won't pick the nominee, but it will winnow down the field.
Absolutely.
Let's say if Newt Gingrich finishes second, whether Ron Paul or Mitt Romney wins, if Newt Gingrich just finishes second, can he can stay in the race? He's still a viable candidate.
I think he's still a viable candidate, but the problem that Newt Gingrich has, for example, is the fact that he's not going to be on the Virginia ballot. You know, what it says about his campaign, we don't know. He will still be a viable candidate, but that makes you ask: can he raise money? Can he run ads? Does he have the financial wherewithal to stick in there even after Iowa, assuming he comes in the top 3?
Now, you mentioned Gingrich on the ballot in Virginia. We talked about a little earlier. But, Steve, I want to read for you what Gingrich's campaign director had to say. They didn't make the ballot. It's 10,000 ballot signatures. A very high bar. But here's what he said. This is Michael Kroll. Newt and I agreed that the analogy is December 1941. We have experienced an unexpected setback, but we will regroup and refocus with increased determination, commitment, and positive action. Well, Michael Kroll obviously won for understatement. Nothing like comparing making a ballot to Pearl Harbor. What does this tell us, Steve? You've been involved in presidential campaigns. What does this tell us? Virginia, it may not mean that much in Virginia. Maybe the race is over by the time we get there. But what does it tell us? What kind of signal does it send that Newt, who, you know, is, if not the national frontrunner, he's close to it at the moment, didn't make the ballot?
It says that the Gingrich campaign can't organize a parade, is what it really says. I mean, for a major, he lives in Virginia, so he should have had plenty of people he could have sent out to get these signatures.
Right.
10,000 is a steep bar, but when you're running for president, you know, it's not that steep. Everybody else who's a major candidate seems to figure out a way to get on the ballot. And, you know, I think it does send a signal to everybody in the Republican sort of political community that this guy is interesting and maybe even fun to watch, but he's not a serious candidate for president of the United States.
I think it's the clearest indication that Gingrich's argument once his campaign collapsed over the summer was that we can run this untraditional campaign. We don't have to be, you know, a transformative post-whatever campaign. And there are real benchmarks you have to meet.
Absolutely.
And his consultants were right. He had to be raising money in the spring. He had to be doing the sort of basic organization. He never did.
What's more interesting to me was that the first savior, Rick Perry, was also unable to qualify for the ballot. And that was actually a bigger surprise because they were supposed to have money, organization, everything going on. And they couldn't
What's
lump them together.
Who was the other person other than Mitt Romney who qualified for the ballot in Virginia?
Ron Paul.
Now, Michelle, I want to ask you because I feel like we don't pay enough attention to Ron Paul given where he stands in the polling. I don't think he is likely to be the Republican presidential nominee, but he could win Iowa. What does that say either about the Republican Party or about where this race goes forward if Ron Paul, even by a small margin, wins the Iowa caucuses a week from today?
Number one, I would say first and foremost, if Ron Paul wins the Iowa caucuses, we're going to see people do a lot more in-depth analysis of who Ron Paul is, what he stands for.
We're already seeing some of it with the newsletters.
We've seen some of it, and I think because of the holiday season, we sort of got away from that. But these are questions of moral character that absolutely have to be asked about Ron Paul. And if he does very well in Iowa, I think the entire nation will sit back and say, we might have a problem here, and we need to really take an in-depth look at for example, his politics when we talk about foreign policy, how he truly feels about the United States government. Most people, I would venture to guess, love our country. So when Ron Paul says, you know, for example, seems to be siding over Iran, with Iran over the United States, it's a huge problem.
Now, one person we haven't talked about, about is the guy who I think most people I talk to think is going to be the nominee, which is Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
Romney.
That's where he likes it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We just spent minutes talking about Ron Paul and Newt Gingrich and Rick Perry. Steve, where does he need to finish? His people, as I mentioned, are saying, well, anyone in the top 3 is fine. Can he finish 3rd? And he still looks strong. Boston Globe poll out over the weekend, 39 Romney, 17 for Gingrich, 17 for Ron Paul. So he's okay in New Hampshire. But can he sustain the momentum he needs if he finishes 3rd behind Paul and Gingrich?
I actually think he can. And I think for Mitt Romney, whose argument from the beginning has basically been, you have no other choice.
Yeah.
I'm the inevitable nominee.
Which I love.
Finishing 3rd behind 2 people like Newt Gingrich and Ron Paul, or even Rick Santorum and Ron Paul, I think makes the case for him. You have no other choice. You better pick me sooner rather than later because I'm going to be the nominee. Look at these 2 people.
And I would say, just to your point, in a piece by John Heilman in New York Magazine, they've got a Romney advisor on background saying there's no scenario under which I don't see us as the nominee, which is they probably believe.
It is what they believe.